On the morning of April 15th, 2026, something happened on the Today Show that stopped tens of thousands of people simultaneously. Savannah Guthrie was on camera. She was sitting across from Anne Hathaway, the actress, the Oscar winner, the woman who was there to talk about her new film Mother Mary and about The Devil Wears Prada 2. Savannah introduced her. She said with that particular warmth she deploys when she is being a television anchor and trying to make everything feel natural, "I've got Miss Anne Hathaway right here, Mother Mary herself." And then the show went to commercial. When it came back, Savannah was gone. Not gone in the way anchors sometimes step away between segments while a co-host handles a transition. Gone in a way that the show did not explain, did not acknowledge, did not address in any way that the millions of people watching live could understand. When the broadcast returned from that commercial break, Hoda Kotb was sitting in the chair where Savannah had been. Anne Hathaway was still there. The interview continued, and Savannah did not come back to that part of the show. She reappeared briefly near the end of the broadcast, a cooking segment, 20 minutes later. But for the Anne Hathaway interview that she had just introduced on live television, she was simply gone. No statement from NBC, no on-air explanation, no post on the show's social media accounts, nothing. And within minutes of that commercial break ending, the clip was everywhere. The unedited version of the live broadcast, Savannah sitting with Hathaway, saying Mother Mary herself, and then the cut, and the return, and the empty chair where she had been, was shared on X and TikTok and Instagram by tens of thousands of people who have been following this case for 75 days. And within hours, one question had spread across every platform simultaneously. Did she get a call? Is there news about Nancy? Tonight, we cover exactly what happened on April 15th, what is known and what is not, what the NBC protocol that exists specifically for this moment means, and what 75 days of this investigation has done to the millions of people who have been watching. We also cover the forensic behavioral analysis from this week, the most specific profile of the man on the doorbell camera that any credentialed expert has offered publicly, and the sheriff's deadline, April 21st, today. What happens if Nanos does not provide a substantive response? And what it means that the lead investigator on the most watched missing persons case in the country is spending the week preparing sworn answers about his own employment history rather than directing a search. Before we go further, subscribe to Unclosed Files right now and hit the notification bell. This is the kind of coverage we provide every week. The investigative days, the forensic days, the institutional accountability days, and the days when this case looks like a woman disappearing from the most watched morning show in America during a commercial break, and tens of thousands of people holding their breath. Subscribe so you are here for all of it. Hit the like button if you felt that breath held yesterday morning. And drop a comment. Did you think the protocol had been activated? Tell me what you thought when you saw that empty chair. I read every single one. Now, let us build the full picture. Because to understand what April 15th generated, and why the response was immediate and visceral and global, you need to understand what the Today Show is and what it has become in the context of this investigation. The Today Show has been on the air since January 14th, 1952. It is the first morning news program in American television history, the program that invented the format that every other morning broadcast in this country has been trying to replicate or beat for more than 7 decades. It has been a fixture of American domestic life for longer than most of its current viewers have been alive. It airs from Rockefeller Center with a window that looks out onto the plaza where fans gather every morning, regardless of weather, to be part of the broadcast and to wave at the cameras and to exist briefly in that particular warm, familiar space that morning television creates for people who are getting their children ready for school, or eating breakfast, or beginning another day. Savannah Guthrie has been the anchor of that show since 2012, 14 years. She has sat at that desk through presidential elections, Supreme Court nominations, natural disasters, public health emergencies, and the full, unending catalog of what it means to deliver the news of the world to people every morning. She has become, over those 14 years, one of the most recognizable presences in American morning television. Not just a broadcaster, but a face that millions of people have invited into their homes every day for more than a decade. Someone whose reliability and consistency at that desk has made her a kind of fixed point in the daily lives of an enormous audience. The last morning she was at that desk before everything changed was Friday, January 30th, 2026. She went through the show. She delivered the news. She said goodbye to viewers. She went home. She expected to be back on Monday. She was not back on Monday. She was not back for 9 Mondays. For 75 days, 2.5 months, the chair had someone else in it. The show continued. Hoda Kotb, who came back to fill in, sat where Savannah had been. 3 million people a day watched the Today Show, and the face was different, and something was unmistakably absent. In those 75 days, the case that was keeping her from the desk generated more sustained national media coverage than almost any missing persons case in American history. The FBI released doorbell camera footage of a masked, armed figure at Nancy's front door at 1:47 in the morning. DNA was collected from inside the home, found to be a complex mixed sample that has been sent to multiple laboratories, including the FBI's National Lab for Advanced Analysis. Ransom notes arrived at media outlets with a Bitcoin wallet that has recorded 0 transactions in 75 days. The Board of Supervisors invoked a territorial-era law to compel the sheriff to answer questions under oath. A deputy was arrested on a kidnapping charge while this investigation was active. A unanimous no-confidence vote was cast by the sheriff's own deputies. A drone flew over the crime scene on day 68. And through all of it, Savannah Guthrie was living inside what she described on Easter Sunday as the grievous and uniquely cruel injury of not knowing. She came back to the Today Show on April 6th, 9 days before April 15th. She wore a bright yellow dress. She looked into the camera and said, "It is good to be home." And then she said, "Ready or not, let's do the news." And just like that, the broadcast moved forward, covering global events, everyday headlines, everything except Nancy. On April 15th, the 9th day back, she introduced Anne Hathaway and then disappeared from the broadcast. Now let us look carefully at what actually happened on April 15th, because the full picture requires the honest examination that serious coverage demands. The Today Show operates with a fluid format in which the co-hosts divide interview duties throughout the broadcast. It is not unusual for one anchor to conduct an interview while the other is elsewhere on the show or in the building. Co-hosts regularly step away between segments, to prepare for another segment, to handle a production matter, to do the 100 practical things that running a live morning show requires. The division of interview duties is standard operating procedure, not exceptional circumstance. Several viewers who watched the full April 15th broadcast made exactly this point. Some noted that Savannah returned to the broadcast approximately 20 minutes later for a cooking segment. Not at the very end of the show, as some early social media posts suggested, but within the same hour. Others noted that in the streaming version of the broadcast on YouTube, the footage of Savannah introducing Hathaway before the commercial break did not appear at all. That the YouTube version went directly to Hoda conducting the interview, which suggested the clip that went viral was from the live feed and not from the edited streaming version. An industry source told the Daily Mail that the routine explanation for exactly this kind of switch is straightforward. It is not unusual for a host to tease an upcoming segment at any point and for another host to do the interview. Anchors introduce segments they are not going to conduct all the time. The tease is separate from the interview in live morning television production. That is the honest, complete, responsible version of what happened on April 15th. A format decision that is routine in morning television production. No new official updates in the Nancy Guthrie case. No confirmation of any development. No statement from NBC. Savannah Guthrie back on air 20 minutes later. And yet, none of that factual accounting changes what tens of thousands of people felt in the seconds between when the commercial break ended and when they understood that the protocol had not been activated. It does not change why the response was immediate and visceral. It does not change what the word protocol means in the context of this case, and why every person following it knows exactly what that word means. Because there is a protocol. That is not speculation. That is a documented, confirmed fact reported by the Daily Mail from an NBC insider. If a producer on the Today Show has a significant development in the Nancy Guthrie case while Savannah is on air, the producer tells her she is needed off-set. Those 3 specific words. Savannah hears them, and she knows immediately that the world is about to change. The plan, as described by the source, is simultaneous. Savannah goes off-set. She goes to an office. She is told what the development is. At the same time, another anchor reports it to the public. The country finds out at the same moment as the daughter. That protocol exists because NBC has thought through exactly what that moment looks like. An anchor who has been back at the desk for 9 days after 75 days away, whose mother is still missing, who walks into that studio every morning knowing that somewhere in that building, a producer has 3 words ready, that if she hears those 3 words, the broadcast will continue without her and the world will change, that she will go to an office and be told something that cannot be untold. Every person who has been following this case for 75 days knows about that protocol. They have been waiting for the segment that does not end. They have been watching the broadcast every morning knowing that the format switch, the empty chair, the Hoda stepping in, any of those things could be routine or could be the moment. And on April 15th, for several minutes, it looked like the moment. It was not the moment, not as confirmed at this time. The case had no new official updates. Savannah returned to the broadcast. The investigation continues. But the response that those few minutes generated, the tens of thousands of people who shared the clip, who wrote that they could not breathe, who said they were sitting in their cars in parking lots, unable to move until they knew, is a measure of what 75 days has done, not to the investigation, to the people watching it. They have been participants in something that has no resolution, and they have been carrying the weight of that with a family they do not know but feel they know, in the same way that 14 years of watching someone deliver the news every morning creates a specific kind of familiarity that is its own real thing. The moment on April 15th was not the breakthrough, but it was a window into what the breakthrough will look like when it comes. The collective breath held, the platforms flooded, the people in parking lots, because the community that has gathered around this case over 75 days has made itself ready. Ready in a way most of them were not ready for anything before February 1st. Now let us examine the investigative picture that emerged this week alongside the Today Show moment, because the forensic and behavioral analysis that has been publicly offered deserves the serious, detailed examination it has not always received. Dr. Gary Brucato, a forensic researcher who appeared on Brian Enton Investigates, brought a specific clinical observation to this case that most coverage has not examined with sufficient depth. He examined the behavioral profile of the masked figure visible in the doorbell camera footage, and he said something that deserves to be understood precisely. The man on that camera was, in Brucato's professional assessment, too calm under pressure, not just composed in the way that practiced criminals sometimes learn to be. Composure beyond what even experienced offenders typically display in the act of committing a violent crime against an elderly woman in her own home. He looked, Brucato said, like someone who was not flinching, someone conducting a task rather than committing a crime. That observation requires unpacking because the gap between those two things is not small. When human beings commit acts of violence, the nervous system responds. The sympathetic activation, elevated heart rate, elevated respiration, the physiological cascade that the body produces when it categorizes something as a profound transgression or a mortal threat, is largely involuntary and largely visible to trained observers. Police officers who have been involved in high-stress incidents describe tunnel vision and auditory exclusion and a distorted sense of time. These are not character weaknesses. They are biology. They are what happens when a human being does something their body categorizes as wrong or dangerous or extreme. The man on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera covered the lens with vegetation from a nearby flower pot, a precise, deliberate action requiring fine motor control. Fine motor control is significantly compromised by high-stress sympathetic nervous system activation. The hands shake. The movements become less accurate. His movements on that footage do not show those signs. He appeared to be doing something he had either done many times before or something that his internal framework had rendered ordinary in a way that prevented the stress response that should have accompanied it. Brucato identified 2 explanations for that composure. The first is habitual experience. Someone for whom criminal activity has become routine enough that the stress response has been habituated away. Professional criminals, people for whom controlled action under pressure is a regular part of their operational environment, do develop this capacity over time through repetition. The second explanation is psychological distance. Someone who has constructed a sufficiently coherent internal narrative about what they are doing that the act does not register as the transgression it is. Someone for whom the justification, the framework, the moral architecture is strong enough that what they are doing feels to them like something other than crime. Not a person doing something wrong, a person doing something they have decided is right. Both explanations can be true simultaneously, and both point toward a specific profile that Brucato then connected to the most consistently documented statistical reality about violent crime against women. Between 76 and 92% of women who are victims of violent crime know their perpetrator in some way. This is not a contested finding. It is the consistent result of decades of research across multiple studies and methodologies. The overwhelming majority of violent crime against women is committed by someone within the victim's world. Someone who knew them, had access to them, understood their routines, had been in their space. The unknown stranger who selects a victim at random represents a statistical minority. If Nancy Guthrie's case falls in that 76 to 92%, and Brucato assessed that the evidence pattern is consistent with that population, then the person on that doorbell camera, or the person who directed the person on that camera, possess specific knowledge that strangers do not have. The layout of the back patio, the placement of the flower pots used to prop open the back doors in darkness without error, the type and configuration of the camera system, the timing of Nancy's return home, the window between when her hearing aids came out and when the cameras went dark. This is not knowledge a random actor develops through general surveillance. It is knowledge that comes from proximity, from having been inside that world. Brucato went further than the access question. He argued specifically for a two-person operational structure, not as a general possibility, but as the assessment that the behavioral evidence on the camera supports. The person visible on the footage is, in his reading, an executor rather than an architect, someone operating from a directed position, someone whose job was execution, following a plan that someone else designed, going to a location that someone else selected, doing what he was told to do by someone whose face we have not seen. Someone who may not have been carrying the full psychological weight of the decision, because the decision had been made by someone else. Someone who could be that calm because the moral calculus, the planning, the selection of the target, all of that belonged to the architect. That architect is living what Brucato called a double life, presenting a face to the world that has no visible connection to what happened on February 1st, going to work, conducting their daily existence, living within whatever social and professional world they inhabit while carrying the knowledge of what they set in motion. They have been doing that for 75 days, watching the coverage, calculating. Every new development assessed against the question of how close the investigation has come. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer has assessed consistently throughout this investigation that the ransom communications may have been written by someone with a specific psychological orientation, someone whose language reflects a moral framework, potentially including religious or scriptural framing. Someone who sees themselves as righteous in a way that makes the language of the communication specific to them, traceable through linguistic and behavioral analysis, distinct in ways that the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Division has been examining since February. If the architect wrote the notes, and it would be the architect, not the executor, who constructed the communications infrastructure, then the psychological signature in the language is the architect's signature, not generic, not anonymous, specific to a person with a specific belief system and a specific way of constructing moral justification for harm. The FBI has had those documents since early February. They have been applying behavioral analysis to them for 75 days. The psychological profile of the person who wrote those notes is part of what convergence will confirm when the other threads, the blockchain, the DNA, the cell tower data, arrive at a name. Now let us address what is happening today, April 21st, because today is the deadline. On April 7th, 2026, the Pima County Board of Supervisors gave Sheriff Chris Nanos 10 business days to provide either a written or verbal response to 4 specific areas of questioning: his work history, his disciplinary record, his department's budget management, and his cooperation with federal immigration authorities. The deadline for that response is today, April 21st. It coincides with the board's next scheduled meeting. Board Vice Chair Matt Hines has been explicit about what failure to comply means. He told reporters directly, "I believe that this board would be well within our legal rights to vacate that office and remove him if he doesn't comply with the statute. Remove him. Not pass a resolution, not vote no confidence. Declare the office vacant and appoint an interim sheriff while a replacement is identified." The mechanism is Arizona Revised Statute 11253, Section A. which empowers the board to demand information from county officers regarding the duties of their office. It is described as a territorial era law because it predates Arizona statehood, a provision from the territorial period that has rarely been invoked because the circumstances that would justify invoking it rarely arise. These circumstances have arisen. The documented record of Nano's past that has emerged over recent weeks is specific and is in the public record. 8 suspensions during his tenure with the El Paso Police Department between 1979 and 1982, including allegations involving excessive force, illegal gambling, habitual tardiness, and insubordination. A resignation from that department in lieu of termination in 1982, 2 years earlier than Nanos indicated on his publicly posted resume and in a sworn deposition. A resume that described a promotion to captain in Pima County in 2007 rather than 2009. A loaded firearm brought to Tucson International Airport in November 2024. A no-confidence vote from his own deputies of 241-0. In a sworn deposition, Nanos had said he had never been suspended. The employment records from El Paso say otherwise. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer told Newsweek that all of this represents what she called a huge distraction from the actual work of finding Nancy Guthrie. She said, "If he is getting good counsel, he will submit only in writing. And my biggest concern with all of this is what an absolute distraction it is. He is supposed to be leading the Guthrie case." That statement frames precisely what the institutional situation means in human terms. The lead agency in the most high-profile missing persons investigation in the country is being led by a sheriff who, this week, has been preparing sworn answers to questions about his own employment history. Every hour spent on that response is an hour not spent directing an investigation that has no arrest after 75 days. Even if Nanos provides a substantive response today, the board has reserved the right to pursue a resolution of no confidence if they are dissatisfied with the answers. Former U.S. Surgeon General and former Pima County Sheriff Dr. Richard Carmona described the early handling of the crime scene as corrupted and said publicly that you cannot reconstitute a crime scene once it has been compromised. The lead detective on the case had never supervised a homicide before this investigation. Sources with knowledge of the investigation told News Nation that first responders treated the scene as a search and rescue operation rather than a criminal investigation in the earliest critical hours. A misclassification that had documented consequences for the initial search radius and the evidence collection timeline. These are the conditions under which the investigation has been running. Not in an ideal institutional environment, in an environment where the lead agency has been managing an internal credibility crisis while simultaneously pursuing the most complex kidnapping case in its history. The FBI's dedicated task force continues operating regardless. C.C. Moore's genetic genealogy work on the DNA continues. The cell tower data analysis continues. The tattoo database search continues. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell stated publicly that removing Nanos from office would not affect the continuity of the federal investigation. The investigation does not live or die on one man's credibility, but it is harder than it needed to be because of what happened in the first 33 days and because of what has happened since. Today is April 21st, the deadline is today. And whatever Nanos provides or does not provide will become part of the permanent public record of this case. A case that, if Nancy is not found alive, will be studied and examined for decades by investigators, prosecutors, legal scholars, and journalists who will want to understand how an investigation with hundreds of agents, global attention, and a 7-figure reward produced no arrest in its first 75 days. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since the night of January 31st. She left her daughter Annie's home that evening after dinner and a card game, was driven home by her son-in-law, went inside, closed the garage door at 9:50 p.m., and somewhere between that moment and 2:28 a.m., when her pacemaker stopped syncing with her phone, she was taken. Without her shoes, without her medication, without her phone, with no confirmed proof of life in 75 days. Her daughter went back to work 9 days ago in a bright yellow dress. She sat across from a movie star and said Mother Mary herself and introduced an interview she was then not there to conduct. And tens of thousands of people who have been watching this family carry something unimaginable held their breath for 4 minutes in parking lots and at kitchen tables and on phones in offices. That is what 75 days has made of the people following this case. They are not passive observers. They are people who have learned the protocol, who know what needed offset means. who are ready in a way that most of them were not ready for anything before February 1st, for the segment that does not end. The segment did not end on April 15th. The case had no new official updates. Savannah came back on air 20 minutes later. The broadcast signed off. She went home and came back the next day. The investigation is still running. The deadline is today. The DNA is in the laboratory. The blockchain records every transaction permanently, and the FBI follows mathematics, not witnesses. The genealogy pipeline is building a family tree. The behavioral signature of the architect is in documents the FBI has had since February. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Her family has been carrying this for 75 days. And the people who took her, the executor who covered his wrist and left 1 inch of himself on a federal camera, and the architect who is living their double life somewhere in Arizona, are running out of the things that were protecting them. The blockchain does not forget. The DNA does not decay. The tip line is still open, and the community that is gathered around this case is still watching every morning, ready or not. If you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Submit tips at tips.fbi.gov. The Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line is 520-351-4900. The combined reward is over $1 million, completely anonymous. Subscribe to Unclosed Files, hit the notification bell, drop a comment below and tell me what you felt when you saw that empty chair on April 15th. We are here every week for every development in this case, and in every case that still demands answers. We will be here when the segment finally does not end. This documentary was produced for informational and educational purposes only, based on publicly available sources including reporting from the Daily Mail, Newsweek, the Arizona Republic, AZPM, News Nation, Reality T, Board Panda, and on the record statements from named credentialed professionals, including Dr. Gary Brucato, Jennifer Coffindaffer, Cece Moore, and Maureen O'Connell. No individual has been charged in connection with the Nancy Guthrie case. The official clearance of all immediate family members by the Pima County Sheriff's Department remains in effect. All analysis of the April 15th Today Show departure reflects the documented factual record. No new case developments were confirmed at the time of this video's production, and Savannah Guthrie returned to the broadcast approximately 20 minutes after the segment in question. This channel has no affiliation with the Guthrie family, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, or the FBI. She deserves to be found. The protocol is in place, and we are still here. Let us also spend some time on what 75 days without a resolution has done to the investigative resources and public attention around this case, because that context matters for understanding where the investigation is right now and what the coming weeks may produce. In the first weeks after Nancy disappeared, the case had something that most missing persons investigations do not have: sustained, global, daily attention. Tens of thousands of tips poured into the FBI's line in the first 24 hours after the doorbell footage was released. The case was covered by every major network, every streaming platform, every true crime channel and podcast and YouTube creator who follows investigative cases. The public attention generated a searchlight that covered the evidence in ways that institutional resources alone cannot replicate. The 3-mile radius around Nancy's home was walked by volunteers. Neighborhoods canvassed, ring cameras submitted, neighbors interviewed. A retired NYPD detective analyzed a ring camera 2.5 miles away and identified a vehicle. A tattoo artist with 30 years of experience in New York City analyzed 1 inch of visible ink on a wrist. A genetic genealogist described the DNA pipeline in enough detail that the public understood exactly how it works. Former FBI agents, behavioral analysts, forensic researchers, all of them conducting public analysis of the documented record that supplemented the institutional investigation with the collective expertise of people who were not on the official payroll, but who brought genuine professional skill to the evidence. That public attention has, by 75 days, moderated. Tips have reduced in volume. Coverage has shifted from daily saturation to periodic updates. The case is still being covered, but the initial wave of attention that characterized February and early March has given way to the slower, quieter phase of investigation that complex cases enter when the obvious leads have been pursued, and what remains is the long methodological work of DNA analysis and genealogy trees, and warrant processes and laboratory timelines. This is normal. It is what happens in investigations that do not produce early arrests. It does not mean the investigation is stalled. C.C. Moore has said specifically that the DNA work is ongoing and that new technological capabilities are being developed. The FBI's National Laboratory has received the evidence. The cell tower analysis is being conducted. These are methodological processes that move on their own timelines, independent of public attention. But the reduction in public tips matters. The community of people who have been watching this case closely and who represent collectively an enormous pool of observational capacity are the most likely source of the breakthrough that formal investigative methodology cannot produce on its own. Someone who knew about something concerning last year, who saw something in the Catalina foothills area in January, who recognized the wrist in the doorbell footage, who has a memory that gained new context from a piece of evidence covered in this video. That person may not have connected the dots yet. They may be waiting for the connection to become clear. They may be waiting for the right question to be asked in the right way at the right moment. That is why this video exists. That is why the April 15th moment generated the response it did, not because the protocol was activated, but because the community that formed around this case in February has not dissolved. It is still here, still watching, still ready to share the clip, to call the tip line, to send the message that changes what investigators know, still holding its collective breath in parking lots and at kitchen tables. The Today Show went to commercial on April 15th, and Savannah Guthrie was gone when it came back, and tens of thousands of people knew immediately what that might mean because they have spent 75 days learning the protocol, learning the terminology, learning what the blockchain trail means, and what investigative genetic genealogy can do, and what the black and gray tattoo style on a wrist tells a 30-year veteran of the industry. They have become involuntarily, through the force of this case and the specificity of its evidence, a community of informed observers who are paying attention in ways that most missing persons cases never generate. That attention is a resource. It is a real investigative resource. And the moments when it is focused most acutely, the moments when someone shares a clip and a question spreads across every platform simultaneously, are the moments when the person sitting somewhere with the memory that matters may finally make the connection. April 15th was not that moment, but it was a reminder that the connection, when it comes, will happen fast. The clip will spread before the official announcement. The protocol will be visible in real time on 100 cameras before any press conference. The community will know before most of the institutions do. That is what 75 days has built, and it is still here. There is something about the specific moment that happened on April 15th that deserves direct examination beyond the protocol question, because it connects to the specific experience of what it is to watch someone carry grief in public on television every day. Savannah Guthrie said on Easter Sunday that she is living inside what she described as the grievous and uniquely cruel injury of not knowing. Not grief, not loss. The injury of not knowing. The specific psychological category of ambiguous loss, the term that clinicians use for the state of mourning something whose status cannot be confirmed, something that exists in a permanent superposition of hope and dread. She goes to work in a yellow dress and says ready or not, and delivers the news of the world to 3 million people, and then goes home to not knowing. She introduced an actress whose new film is called Mother Mary, the maternal figure of a religious tradition, the mother who witnessed suffering she could not prevent, the name that carries the specific weight of what it is to be a mother in extremity, and the observation was not lost on the people watching. A film called Mother Mary, introduced by a daughter whose mother is missing. The unconscious resonance of the moment was not nothing, and then she was gone from the interview that followed. Whether the producers simply rotated the interview to Hoda for standard production reasons, or whether something in that moment required Savannah to step back, whatever the true and ordinary explanation was, the audience that has been following this for 75 days could not help reading meaning into the empty chair. Because that is what ambiguous loss does to the people who witness it from the outside. It makes every absence potentially significant, every departure potentially the signal, every format switch potentially the moment. That is not excessive. It is the natural consequence of what this case has asked the people following it to hold. It has asked them to pay close attention to a family's grief in real time, over 75 days, with no resolution. It has asked them to become fluent in the language of the investigation, the blockchain, The genealogy pipeline, the doorbell footage, the tattoo, the 41-minute window, while simultaneously watching a daughter go to work every day carrying something that has no category in ordinary experience. The Today Show was not designed to be watched the way this community is watching it right now. It was designed to be morning television, warm, accessible, reliably present. The fixed point of the domestic morning. Savannah understood something about that when she came back in the yellow dress and said ready or not. She was restoring something for the audience as much as for herself. Restoring the fixed point, saying, by being there, that the ordinary rhythms of the day are still available, even when extraordinary things are happening just behind the camera. But the protocol exists. The 3 words exist. And the community knows they exist. And that means every morning that Savannah is on that desk, there is a layer underneath the ordinary morning television warmth that 3 million people are aware of. A layer that only became visible when she was gone from the Anne Hathaway interview on April 15th and tens of thousands of people simultaneously started asking the question. That layer is not going away until the case resolves, until the segment either does not end, or until something happens that tells the family and the public and the 3 million people who have watched this case through Savannah's presence at that desk every morning what actually happened on February 1st, 2026 in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona. 75 days, no arrest, no publicly named suspect, a deadline today, a DNA sample in a federal laboratory, a blockchain trail that never forgets, a community that learned the protocol and is still watching. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. The investigation continues, and we will be here for every development until it does. One more thing deserves to be said about where this investigation stands at day 75 in the context of what the forensic evidence is capable of producing and on what timeline. C.C. Moore, the chief forensic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, said something in her most recent public comments about this case that the coverage has not fully absorbed. She said that hair samples from Nancy's home could be significant, that advancements in DNA extraction from rootless hair have accelerated to the point where a profile can potentially be extracted from a hair that would have been forensically useless 5 years ago. She said, hair absolutely can make this case solvable. The technology is advancing quickly. She also said something specifically about this case's impact on that technology, that a company has accelerated its development timeline because of the attention around the Guthrie investigation, which means that the evidence sitting in the laboratory is not waiting for technology that will never exist. It is waiting for technology that is being actively developed in part because of this case. The timeline is not open-ended, it is shortening. The genetic genealogy process, when it begins from a viable DNA profile, works by building a family tree from partial matches in consumer DNA databases, the databases that millions of people have voluntarily contributed to through ancestry services. From those partial matches, genealogists build outward through the family tree until they reach a generation that can be narrowed through other evidence: geographic location, physical description, timeline. When that narrowing produces a name, investigators confirm it through traditional methods: surveillance DNA collected from a discarded object, a sample from a doorknob, a glass, a surface. The confirmation is then definitive. Brian Kohberger's arrest in connection with the Idaho student murders took 47 days from when investigators had a viable DNA profile to when he was in custody. 47 days from profile to arrest. The Guthrie investigation has a mixed sample with technical complexity that Kohberger's case did not have. The timeline will be longer, but it is not infinite. When the technology produces a separable profile, the genealogy work begins, and genealogy work has a defined methodology with a defined endpoint. The blockchain trail has a similar character. The Bitcoin wallet is permanently visible on the public ledger. The FBI's blockchain analysis capabilities, developed over years of cryptocurrency crime investigations, allow investigators to trace wallet interactions through the cryptocurrency ecosystem, regardless of anonymizing techniques. Every interaction with that wallet, from creation to any future access, is permanently recorded and traceable. The analysis takes time, but it does not hit a wall. It follows mathematics, not witnesses, and mathematics does not change its story. The tattoo is in federal booking databases. The cell tower data is being analyzed. The Google warrant, if served, has produced IP address data that leads to a subscriber name. The vehicle at 2:36 a.m. is being analyzed against vehicle databases and purchase records. Multiple independent threads. all pointing toward the same operational question, all converging from different directions. None of them stalled, all of them running on their own timelines, moving toward the name that the investigation has not yet made public. That is where the investigation stands at day 75. Not cold, not stalled, working, on timelines that are measured in weeks and months, not days, but timelines that have endpoints. Savannah Guthrie went back to work 9 days ago in a yellow dress. She introduced a movie star whose film is called Mother Mary. She disappeared from the interview. The community held its breath. She came back on air. The broadcast signed off. She went home. And tomorrow morning, she will walk back into Studio 1A. She will sit at the desk where she has been sitting for 14 years. She will deliver the news of the world to 3 million people. And somewhere in that building, a producer will have 3 words ready. We are still here, we are still watching, and Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home.